Hi guys, it's RBB. Today I'd like to talk to you about smart objects in Photoshop. Now, if you are very comfortable in Photoshop and you are an advanced, graphic designer or photographer and you know all about smart objects and embedding smart objects and linking smart objects and working as a team, this video is not for you. This, like many of these videos, are intended for beginning to intermediate Photoshop users, and today is no exception. Smart objects are a great tool, but are often opened up accidentally, and we're going to see why. All right, so if I want to open an image, a lot of my students will just take an image from their desktop and drag it down into the program they want to open. So if there's a picture on the desktop, they'll drag that file down to Photoshop. Photoshop will pop up and it'll open that picture. Okay, and sometimes that works great, but sometimes it doesn't, and we want to see what happens. So for example, right now in Photoshop, I have nothing open, no document ready yet. If I were to take an image from my desktop and just simply drag it into my workspace and let go, the image will open up in its native resolution, full size. So this picture of downtown Reykjavik is 18 inches by 13 inches. It opened up just like it exists. I can even look in image and canvas size and see that it is 17.7 by 13. How big is it in pixels? It is 1280 by 960, so not quite a full 2K widescreen. Okay, so there we go. That opened it up, and that opened up fine because I had nothing else open in Photoshop. But let's close that. Okay, let's say I do have something open, any document, or the document I'm actively working on, or just something else that happens to be open. So if I have an 8.5 by 11 open, I'm just going to open up our sort of standard document we work on. Now if I drag that image in to my workspace, it's going to open up differently. Now remember, this was 18 by 13, but here my document is 8.5 by 11, and it opened up inside the document, so it like shrunk to fit the document. So that's pretty smart, right? It also was born with these transform anchors nodes right here, and it was born with this X across it. This tells me that this is a vector container. Okay, it is not a raster, it's not smashed into these individual pictures. It is resizable like text, okay, because it's just a vector container. And I can rearrange this and decide where I want this. Let's say I'm making a brochure or something. And when I'm happy with it and it's where I want, I can click OK up here, click the check mark. Now when I do, something has happened. I've brought this into my image, but if you look over here in our layers, this layer that says Reykjavik has this weird little icon down here, which tells me that this is a smart object. Now the smart object remains editable, which is cool because it's just referencing. I didn't really open that image from my desktop. I'm simply referencing it. And there's a container here, a frame that is referencing that container. That's why I can resize it and do things like that without actually changing the original image. So that's kind of cool. I can resize it. I can hit Command or Control T, resize, rotate, things like that. I can also, under images here, I can go to my adjustments and change, like, let's say the hue and saturation. All right, and let's say I do want to change the hue and saturation. Maybe I want to change the hue a little bit. I want to desaturate it. Okay. Now this is working destructively because we've talked in the past about how you don't want to change the actual layer. If I wanted to do an adjustment layer, I would have come down here and chosen my adjustment layer, which is this black and white cookie looking thing, and it would have opened up an adjustment layer on its own layer so that later on if I decide I don't want this, I can always poke it in the eye, turn it on and off, or I can grab the whole layer and simply delete it, but I'm not affecting my image layer. So with a smart object, when I do the adjustments from here, I am affecting the actual layer, okay, which is destructive. So it does let me do some things, but let's say I want to blur the edges or something and I want to actually affect the pixels. I want to paint on this or erase it. So here's my eraser tool. If I try to erase, I get a warning. When warnings pop up, read them. This one says, this smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. Edit contents will no longer be available. Rasterize the smart object. A lot of times, even if we read it, we're like, whatever, okay, just do it. Okay, without understanding what it's saying. This is saying that I'm going to take this editable container and I'm going to put it into pixels. When I'm going to rasterize, remember we talked about rasters, pixels, and resolution. If I say, yes, rasterize this, and I say, okay, it is no longer a smart object, which means that I can't transform that like I could before. I can still transform it, but it is now, I only have this amount of pixels to work with, not that big 18 by 13 image. Okay, so I have lost the ability to adjust this smart object. Okay, now let's talk about why you would want a smart object. So you may say, well, why in the world would I ever want to do that? Well, most of the time you wouldn't, so don't be lazy. Don't just drag and drop things. We want to actively go into File and open that image. In After Effects, we would import an image. In Illustrator, we would place an image. So it's a different verb, but in Photoshop, we would open the image and then we could do what we want to with it. So you say, well, why would I want a smart object? Why would I, in my beginning learning Photoshop here, why would I want a smart object? Let me show you why. Let's drag and drop that picture of Reykjavik again. And it's going to do the same thing. It's going to make a container, okay, that is adjustable, okay? And let's say that I'm happy with it like this. And I say, okay, place it there. Now this is what I can do. Let's say I'm working with a team of people and I'm putting together a travel brochure of Iceland and different seasons. And someone else is going to edit this picture for me while I'm setting up the rest of the document. Remember, this is referencing an original image on my desktop. You can see it's a smart image. A smart object. If I double click on the thumbnail itself, it opens up in a separate file. See, here's the one I was working on before. Here it opened up in its own file, and I can see it's 18 by 13 and it's real size. And now if I do something to this, like paint a big red cloud in the sky for whatever reason, okay, great. That's what my art team did. Okay, that's why they make the big bucks, okay? They made this, that's great. Okay, and someone else on my team worked on this, painted it, lovely. Okay, notice that it didn't change in its container and reference form, even though I'm changing it over here. When they save this original, if they go over here and they say save, watch this magic. Okay, once they save this smart object reference, it automatically updates in my document. So working with a team of people, this is a fantastic way to not have to like, well, send me it once you've edited it, and then I'll copy it and I'll paste it and things like that. So a smart object is a great way for a team of people to work, but it's sort of redundant. It's like driving from the passenger seat if I'm the only one working on this. So if I want to keep it as an editable container and move it around and do some adjustments, a smart object makes sense. If I'm just being lazy and dragging and dropping and working with smart objects, I now have a document that is much larger than it needs to be because a smart object holds a lot of information and I don't need it to. So I want to make smart objects when I mean to, not because I'm being lazy. Okay, so don't be a dummy. Use smart objects the way you're supposed to, or don't use them at all. And anytime you get warnings in Photoshop, read them. It'll generally tell you either what's wrong or what to do to fix it. Okay, please let me know in the comments if there's any tool or gadget or gizmo in Photoshop you'd like me to show you. And other than that, we're all done. All right, be well.